Hey everyone, we're thrilled to announce that we at The Biographers officially have our first sponsor, McQueen Pipes. If you're like me, which is a nerd who appreciates high-quality handmade products that are also inspired by The Lord of the Rings, you gotta check out McQueen Pipes. You've got pipes with names like the Ranger, the Wizard, the Halfling, the Goblin, and the Barrel Rider. Whether you enjoy pipe tobacco, vaping, marijuana, or just appreciate the craftsmanship of a handmade, wood-stemmed pipe, McQueen Pipes has got you covered with all kinds of accessories to accommodate your smoking preferences. Check out McQueen Pipes today and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your order. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the Queen of England. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Don't wait for the return of the king. Check out McQueen Pipes today.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Ehrlich.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. This is, would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to The Biographers.
I was gonna text you when I found this out last night, but then I was like, I'll just see him tomorrow. Aaron's boss,
Yeah?
Danae, she was mentioned at the wedding. They were there. And her husband Joe have been listening to the podcast. They're almost done with all of Queen Victoria. They're gonna go back and watch Mabel, and they said they love it.
Really?
And I was like, huh! But I didn't get to go to the holiday party last night because Rooney, we just couldn't leave her alone.
Yeah, I understand.
And so Aaron, apparently she said something the other day and he kept forgetting to tell me because he was at work when she said it. And then he called me, like he was driving because the dinner was down in Castle Rock, actually at a really, really good Mexican place that like he brought me food from it. And I'm like,
nice.
I would drive there for this.
So I actually just found a taco truck up the street from us. It's right by Applejack's and it is a 10 out of 10.
Nice.
Super good.
Nice. Tacos it is. But anyway, I don't even know the name of the place. La Loma, I think, actually.
Okay.
It was really good. They had this enchilada sauce that was like, it was like Tex-Mex, actual Tex-Mex enchilada sauce. It was like chili con carne, but instead of ground beef, it was shredded chicken. But the flavor of the sauce was like, oh, it was so good. And the chips are thin. And I don't like it when you get super thick tortilla chips. That drives me crazy. I like the light ones that are so thin. I mean, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound kind of goofy, but like Chili's has those really thin chips, and those are so good.
Great tortilla chips.
They have
Chili
amazing
does.
tortilla
Chili's.
chips, and so they were kind of like those, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love these. I like loved them enough to put them in a plastic bag to like try and preserve them. Well, I mean, Chipotle has pretty thin chips too, so I like all those. I don't like the thick ones.
I think they call them restaurant style because they're all thin and yummy like that.
Yeah, I always thought restaurant style was more about the shape. I have no idea.
You could be right. I thought it was more the thinness, but I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know enough about the science and
the science of tortilla.
I guess what would be the classification?
maybe we could find whoever invented the tortilla chip, and then we could do a mini biography on that person.
Also, speaking of people who you found out that have been listening to the podcast, and it's super cool. So I have a friend named Charlotte who listens to the podcast, and I'm undoubtedly sure she's going to hear me say this. So long story short, I mean, this is close to 10 years ago at this point, probably. Charlotte and I dated for like 2-3 weeks, and then we just became friends.
Okay.
And we've just been literally friends ever since, and really great friends. Charlotte is one of my favorite people probably ever. She's just a lovely, lovely person.
Sidebar, I love the name Charlotte.
I have always loved the name Charlotte too.
It's such a pretty name. It's pretty to look at. It's pretty to say.
And it was really funny too because coincidentally, when Charlotte and I like first started to date, like again, this was like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month tops. My grandma called me and she was like, well, how's it going out in Denver? Are you seeing anybody? And I said, well, yeah, actually, I started to see this girl named Charlotte. And my grandma said the exact same thing. She goes, oh,
such a pretty name.
I love the name Charlotte.
It's a great name.
It was pretty funny and pretty darn cute. But anyways, I found out Charlotte, she texted me because the Spotify Wrapped thing just came out, you know? And it tells you like where you place in terms of listenership and all this kind of stuff. And she's top 5% listeners. Yeah, like she's obsessively listened to seemingly like every episode.
I wonder if we can see from Spotify who or how much people have listened on. I know we can see like the percentage, but like more info. I know we can see on our.
Did you look at our Biographers Wrapped?
No, I didn't.
So if you log into, and you should be able to because it's just our Google credentials to log in or whatever.
I can try it.
Log in and you can look at our Wrapped and it tells you, because it knows that we are podcast hosters. It knows that we're not just...
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank
exactly.
you.
It gives us like an opposite view of it and says...
Folks at home, you can see who's doing more of the business stuff of the podcast.
Which isn't supposed to be the case.
I know.
One of the reasons I was like, Aubrey, come do this with me is because like you're better at businessy stuff than me.
I know. I was thinking about this as I was driving over here because this is the last episode we're recording in the year
2023.
And this started. When did we have brunch?
I marked the calendar. I want to say that it was like February.
Yeah. And this year has been a really crazy year for me. This time last year I was working at a tech job, and then I was my position was eliminated, and I found out December 26th. Fun. And I was secretly very relieved because of the stress,
as we often are.
And then I was kind of like fumbling around, like, "Hey Daniel, like, I gotta get a job," blah, blah, blah. And hey, we should whatever. And then we like met up and had like appetizers. And then, I don't know. And then I like did have another job for 3 months and it's just, I just don't know. It's so crazy. I don't know if I'm cut out for that anymore, which is funny because I was like such a good little tech worker.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I know working for me, you were like, this girl is like such a rule follower and so rah. I mean, I was a rule follower, but I was also a limit pusher because I was trying to change things to make them better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think for anybody that's worked in a corporate situation before, I think you know what I'm talking about when I say there's a difference between people that are genuinely sold out to a company, right? Like, and I say sold out, that's coming from my very Christian upbringing. That's what Christians used to say about how you got to be sold out for Jesus, right?
I've never heard that. I've always heard drink the Kool-Aid, but that's coming from people who are making
sold
fun
out
of
is like,
cults.
yeah, that's like very new agey Christian kind of a thing, which I am not now, not to get into that or anything. But what were we just saying? Now I got
just
sidetracked talking about Christianity.
Sold out to the tech companies,
right? So there's a difference between people that are truly sold out to it, that are just
to their
like,
business,
oh,
not just tech companies, any company.
You guys need to understand what this business is trying to do or whatever. And then there are the people that are like, I really want to succeed.
Yes, that was me. That
and beyond that craving to be successful, I am still myself, and I always knew that in you. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference because I couldn't get along with somebody who was truly like a company person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Unless you're a company owner, I feel like there's a specific type of person that's like, I'm a corporate person.
I'm a company man.
I'm a company man, right?
And
like
then they have a freak out at Christmas when they get a gift certificate instead of a bonus. Although I've never gotten a Christmas bonus ever. I've never, or a holiday bonus or anything. I've never worked anywhere that did that.
I shouldn't say the name of the business. I thought the previous employer that we worked at together did bonuses.
They did bonuses, but it was always just like KPI based. It wasn't like, it's the holidays, here's your bonus. Maybe there was, I don't remember ever getting one.
I think the only bonus that I've ever gotten...
Like a gravy bonus, like on top.
Yeah, I think the only time that's ever happened was when it was related to like the profit share. When it was like, oh yeah, we had a really great year, so we'll give you... this always happens to me too. I got hired at one company and they were like, oh yeah, they do this great stuff for Christmas because they have these, if they have a really good year, they give you good stuff. Like last year, we all got iPads.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, cool. And then of course that year that came around, it was like, we all got like, $100 or something like that in Amazon credit.
I mean, like, oh, okay. Honestly, I would take $100 in Amazon credit. I mean, that's not very much. But over something that I might already have, or if I wanted to buy that thing, then I would have $100 off of it.
True.
Anyway,
an iPad's an iPad, though.
An iPad's an iPad, but sweet. I guess you're always going to have people who like, I just bought an iPad. Gah! Like, true. I don't know, or whatever it may be. I didn't just kick your dog.
Oh, she's.
It wasn't like hard. It was a foot move.
She knows better. She's one of those. My little dog Rocky. She's 15 pounds and she is desperate to be as close to you as possible. So she'll often just crawl under your feet without you knowing it.
Yes.
And I have stepped on her sadly, many a times. I don't want to. It's not something I get satisfaction from by any stretch, but she doesn't know any better, and she's just like, I want to be close to you, so I accidentally step on
Well, and
her
I feel bad
sometimes.
because I'm wearing my new boots.
Oh, gosh.
So
true.
I've picked up some seasonal work. So like about the year, it's been a little wild, like,
Yeah.
right? So now it's the end of the year. I came across some seasonal work delivering items because there's excess delivery things to be done. I won't say the company, but it's a pretty cool gig. You get paid by the hour, you get paid for mileage, you're in your own car. And it's just, I had this boss at a photography company I used to work for, and we had such seasonality to our work. And he would always say, and I love this, you got to make hay while the sun's shining. So that's what I'm doing. Except it's funny because it's winter. But I'm making hay while the sun's shining. So I'm just working a few weeks. And
I like it.
I love it because I'm not like committed forever. Although if I did want to work for this company, because I've been doing this, I could like attempt to apply for other jobs, and I actually get not benefits, but I get like discounts and cool things like that. So it's fun. But because of all of this, because of the difference, I mean, I've been applying to jobs all year. I was required to, and like the market's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to start a podcast and then learn some video editing, which I'm like
really good at.
Thank you. And I have done a little bit of photo editing. I finally got Photoshop again. It's been like this different type of year. I've been taking my mom to appointments, and I was able to travel to Dallas for a long time to see my family and go on another trip to the East Coast with Aaron it was funny because we ended up wanting to stay a few extra days because it had rained.
Mm-hmm.
And his mom was like, why don't you just stay? And he had to be back to teach a class here, but I didn't. So I just drove, and I was just able to do it, like the freedom. So, folks, it would be really cool if we could like make this a thing, because I think I'm just at the point where I want the flexibility and the creativity.
Me too.
And I've also, Daniel knows, I've been coming down from a total knot of anxiety and stress that has been building for a decade. And even the other day when I was working at this seasonal job and like some stuff was going wrong, I wasn't having the physical reaction of stress that I have had in the past when that sort of thing has happened.
Like your hair falling out?
Oh yeah, like my hair falling out.
That was fun.
I don't know if I'm ever gonna like not clinch my jaw, but at least now I have a mouth guard that works. But like I wasn't for me it's I get the like literal anxiety, chest is like tight and everything. I was talking pretty fast, and you know this about me too. I get kind of like rah, rah, blah, blah, blah. But like
okay.
I actually am not, in my own body and mind, I'm not that bad, but other people are like, whoa, this girl is like freaked out right now. But I was like, okay, I was totally fine. And then at the end of the day, I went home. I clocked out and went home.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't think about it till the next day. It was awesome.
Pete Holmes, who I will always mention because he's my favorite comedian.
I love Pete Holmes.
Pete Holmes. Have you watched his new special on Netflix yet?
No, I need to.
It's really funny, and he has this. It's a moment of it, and he just goes. Anybody else have those times where you're at a party all night and then you come home and you put your keys down and you just look at yourself and go, I am not for everyone. And I was like, brother, you just kind of defined my existence. It's like I feel that way all the time. I've also discovered something. You mentioned anxiety. I just put this together like 2 weeks ago. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I have notoriously sweaty hands, sweaty palms. I'm not happy about it. I'm not thrilled about it. I've had people comment on it in my life, much to my embarrassment. It sucks. Nobody likes a guy with sweaty hands.
You married a human person that was okay with your sweaty hands. So
Exactly.
It all worked out.
Exactly. And it's one of these weird things where it was just like, yeah, I don't know what causes it. It's just I have, it is what it is. And then the other day I was sitting there watching TikTok and perfectly fine.
Okay, sidebar. You were like, I'm not on the socials. I don't really do the things. And then like this podcast happens and he is like, TikTok!
Well, you got to, man. It's like, it's one of the only ways you feel like you can get your voice out there at this point.
TikTok.
But anyways, I'm watching this TikTok video and I'll keep this brief because we got to get going in a second here.
Yes.
But I'm watching this video. My hands are fine. And then this video pops up and it's these like 20-something-year-old kids, I want to say in the UK, literally at the top of a not supposed to be climbed skyscraper.
Oh my God.
And they're at this point where they're at this super, super steep incline, climbing up this glass side of this building.
No.
And he grabs the edge of it and looks over it, and it is a sheer drop.
No, and we're sure this wasn't AI?
No. Because this guy, I looked it up afterwards, his whole YouTube channel is going to dangerously high places and exploring it around. So, and I have a really terrible phobia of heights. Really bad.
Yeah.
And so,
I remember when we were on the bridge in Taos and you were like,
and I was like, we can go anytime you guys want. I'm not loving this experience.
It was like fine. The thing that was worst about that bridge is that it's so narrow and the cars are driving by.
And then it would shake when the cars would drive by.
Yeah, the shaking was fine. It was more that the proximity of the cars to us was my thing. But anyway, keep going.
So anyways, as soon as this guy grabs the ledge and pulls himself up so the GoPro looks over the ledge and you see the drop, it was this like, oh my God, I'm just noticing right now my hands are drenched. And it was one of these that was like this instant click of, oh my gosh, I sweat when I'm anxious. Whenever there's something going on in my brain, I don't even know what it is a lot of times, if there's something that's causing me anxiety, that is what makes my hands start to sweat.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
The TikTok diagnoses.
I don't know. I mean,
no, I do understand what you mean though. Like it is weird when you have one of those moments.
Yeah, of like, oh, there's a reason for this whole thing.
Oh, there's a reason.
Anyways, that's a nice, lovely little segue that doesn't exist at all for us to say hello, everyone, and welcome to the Biographers.
Hello.
A long intro, but I suppose let's get right on into it because we've wasted enough time just chit-chatting
this
and
is our problem.
Going in and out of stuff.
Who knows? We should maybe like not record when we start.
No, I like it because I can cut it in anytime that I want to, and it ends up always working. So, Aubrey, are you ready for Ian Fleming Part 3?
Yes, I am ready for Ian Fleming Part 3.
I am very excited because I was just even reviewing it the other day just to make sure everything was looking good, and I was like, this is like my favorite episode so far, so it's pretty fun. So without further ado, let us get going into the life of Ian Fleming Part 3. Now, in our last series, we saw a 19-year-old Ian Fleming leave the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, primarily due to his contraction of gonorrhea. After military service was nixed as an option for a career, he studied for 3 years to pass a test that would secure him a position with the Office of International Affairs, but didn't score high enough to get an actual job.
I'm sorry, his military career was gone, Aria. I didn't make that joke before, did I?
No, but well done.
I was giggling the whole time. I was like, please finish the sentence.
Oh my gosh. Service was gonorrhea as an option. That's well done. I like it. Well constructed. Now, not wanting to see her son fail, Ian's mother, Evelyn, pulled some strings to get him an interview with the Reuters news publication, as was so lovely corrected to me the other day. And at last, Ian landed a job as a journalist. At Reuters, Ian did boots on the ground reporting as a navigator for an Alpine motor race with Donald Healey as the driver. He reported on the trial for the Metro Vickers affair in Moscow and deciphered German radio transmissions during Hitler's rise to power in 1933. But where we left off last time, Ian had just turned down an offer from Reuters to be stationed in Shanghai for a year, opting instead to become an apprentice under Gilbert Russell, with the plan of taking over Gilbert's position as partner of the merchant bank known as Cull and Company. This decision was in part due to Ian's mother, Evelyn, officially cutting him off financially. But where we left off last time, Ian had started working for a stockbroking firm called Rowan Pittman, a job that, much like merchant banking, Ian didn't much care for and wasn't very good at.
The worst stock trader.
The world's worst stockbroker, exactly. Yes. Now, one little anecdote that I think is worth mentioning before we really get going. Aubrey, do you remember in episode 2, I mentioned that Ian was getting into book collecting because of a man named Percy Muir?
Yeah, I did not remember till you just said that, but thank you for reminding me because
Yes.
I'm like, squirrel!
So Ian, in his youth, got into book collecting because of this guy named Percy Muir. And if you remember, he was drawn into Percy's bookstore because of the D.H. Lawrence Snapdragon
And then you were all
publication.
like, D.H. Lawrence and everyone's connected, blah, 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 blah.
No, it wasn't Snapdragon, it was Pansies. That's what it was called. And it was, yes, everything's connected and it's amazing. So, Percy Muir had been regularly accompanying Ian to Kitzbühel for holidays, and to pay for the trips, Percy had been going to Berlin to sell books to a man named Paul Groppa. And Percy would eventually marry Paul's assistant, who was a Jewish woman named Toni Silverman. Now, through his wife, Percy would learn of the true persecution that the Jewish people were suffering under Hitler's regime. And as a result, Percy discovered and developed a system whereby book trading could be used to help Jewish people who were trying to flee Germany and take their money with them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Like
so
communication?
So it was more about how, like, basically the Nazis were freezing Jewish banks and seizing all of their money.
Okay.
So the Jewish people, when this was starting to happen, they basically said, well, it's all restricted. We can't just take this money out of the bank, but what we can do instead is buy rare books. Those rare books maintain their value. The Nazis don't care about us taking books if we're leaving. So if we put all of our money into these rare books, we can relocate and resell the rare books
elsewhere
and take our money with us.
Nice.
So it was basically them. It's like a good form of money laundering almost, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's sort of. Not, maybe not.
Well,
quite the
I mean,
same,
it's almost like buying gold, but the Nazis would be like, we're taking that gold.
Exactly. They're not going to look twice at books.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So pretty darn cool. And so that was all Percy Muir. He figured out this entire system. Now, this operation became a crucial part of the Jewish Underground Railroad that formed when Hitler began to tighten the noose on the Jewish people under the Nazi regime. Undoubtedly, through this process, Percy Muir saved hundreds of lives, if not thousands.
Wow.
And this is all through book collecting.
That's really cool.
Pretty darn cool, right? I don't know. I wanted to mention that because I've never heard this guy before, and that's such a cool little story of helping people out in need. Now, on the Fleming family side of things, Ian's brother Peter had gotten married to a blossoming actress named Cecilia Johnson, much to the disapproval of their mother.
Of course, I was going to say an actress.
I know. Not proper at all.
No.
Now, this actually proved to be such a huge source of disappointment for Eve that she went as far as to write a huge portion of Peter's inheritance out of her will.
Ooh.
The inheritance Peter was supposed to receive was the Fleming family home, known as Turner House.
Oh, wow.
Eve had been living in a countryside house called Gray's Court. Now, upon making the disinheritance official, Eve sold Gray's Court and moved back into Turner House, which is where Ian had actually been living. Now, this actually proved to be a bit of a vibe killer for Ian and his pseudo-bachelor pad, as remember, Eve had a now 11-year-old daughter, Ian's half-sister, Amaryllis, who was an aspiring cellist and practiced often.
Well, at least it wasn't drums.
Yeah, right? But, I mean, I can't imagine like an amateur cellist being a whole lot better.
That was my very bad attempt at a giggling cello.
I didn't write this, but did you know that the cello is the closest musical instrument to the human voice?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Not my human voice.
I didn't realize you sung like a mooing cow.
No, that's when I'm trying to be a cello. When I don't sing like a cello, it's probably worse.
That's funny. All right. Now, the last bit of news on the Fleming family front was the 1937 death of Granny Katie.
Oh, Granny Katie. We liked Granny Katie.
Ian's favorite grandparent. Granny Katie was apparently in such good spirits and health in the weeks, months, and years leading up to her death that she didn't even think to write a will.
Oh, no.
Once again, Ian and his siblings were left high and dry for that sweet inheritance they were looking to get, and Ian now doubly resolved himself to the fact that he would need to make his own way financially.
Wait, so hold on a second. He'd been cut off by his mom, but he was living at home.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's, I mean, if you don't have to pay rent, you're doing okay.
I know, that's like a big part of it.
Yeah,
but, okay.
And
Man.
undoubtedly, he had like a car to borrow and all kinds of stuff. He just was, yeah.
I don't know if I said this before, but I'll say it again if I did, and I'll say it for the first time if I didn't. A friend of mine, Jordan, her mother is an attorney, and she said, if you hate your family, die without a will.
Okay.
Because she's not meaning to do it, but it just causes a lot of problems.
I can imagine.
Poor grandchildren of Granny Katie.
I mean, hey, there's a part of it though that I just go guys, you had all of you. You have every opportunity in front of you. You have every advantage.
Oh yeah, no, these people were
to where you don't need
privileged.
this inheritance.
Yeah, it's like, you're a bad stockbroker. Here, let's get you a different job.
Literally, it's and what we're going to see is even with that stockbroking company. We'll get into it a little bit. I touch on it very, very briefly at one point, but they keep Ian on retainer the entire duration of the war.
Oh, really?
Just out of as a thank you, as an attaboy. And I'm like, hey, look, that's great, but that would not happen today.
No.
It would not happen.
No.
And so it's one of those where, again, you're like, dude, this is crazy. You know what I mean? This is just a different time with a different straight up class of people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of this change in the house was just too much for Ian. So finally, at the age of 28, he decided it was time to get his own place.
You know what? That is actually like today's times because
It really
people can't
is.
afford to.
It really is, dude, especially in Los Angeles. It is like the norm in LA that you live with your parents till you're like 24, 25.
It's actually the norm in a lot of places. When I studied
probably
abroad
true.
in Spain, like all of the adult children just lived there
Well,
until
Europe, yeah.
until they marry.
Yeah.
And because why would you not move out? Like that's just what they do.
Just they don't need as much privacy, apparently.
I don't know. It was anyway.
Now, Ian's first apartment wasn't so much an apartment, but more of a converted school building sitting at 22 Ebery Street, having been originally built in 1830.
Okay, that is really cool. And I actually saw this like couple on TikTok that's converting an old school to their home, and I'm like, I wish I could do that.
Check this out. His apartment, even inside of this school, is like, in my opinion, probably the coolest apartment of what you can get. So, and we're going to get there in just a second. Now, on the front of the building, inscribed into the stone, was a phrase in Latin which translated to, quote, "The Right Honourable Viscount Milton laid the first stone of this building on the 14th of May, 1830. May the Holy Spirit direct this task undertaken for the instruction of boys in Christ's faith and moral and literary arts."
Very cool.
Not exactly a fitting phrase for what type of business Ian was to conduct while a resident there.
Guess not.
Now, the building had been converted into a set of apartments, and Ian's occupied the top half of the school's chapel. In order to get in, he and his guests needed to ascend a steep spiral staircase, but were greeted with high sloped ceilings and an open floor plan. The bathroom had been built into the recess where the altar of the chapel had been, so Ian was able to give a whole new meaning to the phrase, praying to the porcelain god.
Or the throne room.
I was between sitting on the throne and praying to the porcelain god.
Okay,
I wasn't sure which one I was going to go with.
Porcelain god was pretty.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. Now, the entire apartment had been decorated by one of Percy Muir's Jewish refugees named Rosie Reese, and the whole place reflected Ian's dignified style, lending itself to entertaining his friends often, who referred to themselves as the Circle.
Ooh, cool.
And many of these friends would go on to serve as inspiration for a host of James Bond characters. Now, I'll briefly say this little group of people, the Circle, there isn't that I could find any specific character in the James Bond universe that was like, it's this one person that's super famous. It's more of like a very, if anybody here has actually met an author or writer, a lot of characters are like, yeah, this was inspired by you. But then if you kind of look into it, it's like very loosely. It's an initial starting point for a character.
Yeah.
And
like,
that's sort of what this was.
You think of someone and they may have like one quirky trait or something, and that kind of like kicks off the character.
Right.
Like you don't want it to be too on the nose because then people are going to be like, wait a second. Is that what you think of me?
Exactly. Which actually, funny enough, we'll get there. There is one character in the James Bond universe that Ian like directly modeled the character afterwards. And the person who was modeled after was like no secret. They were like, it's not exactly flattering. When you really look at the character, it's cool, but it's not like awesome. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. So, but we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, the other use Ian had for his new apartment was, again, for the lady folk. Mm-hmm. It does seem that around this time, being 28 and recently forced to end his engagement with Monique, that Ian fell into the stereotypes of sexually charged and emotionally immature men. He was out on the prowl, and not in a good way. He's described sort of like a hunter who didn't at all understand the animal he was hunting, but he was very much interested in shooting it down, if you know what I mean.
And that's men. No.
A lot of times. He was known to employ pickup lines and eventually resorted to what he called a put down. In the idiot days of my mid-20s, we called it negging.
Negging. I was going to say, is it negging?
Uh-huh. And even I thought it was stupid. I never did it. Just for the record, that was not my bag. I was like, negging? Why would you go be mean to somebody? That's just stupid.
Some people like thrive on that though, which is sad. I mean,
it really is. Now, I thought it was stupid, but apparently Ian did not, and started off many a conversation with women by saying something mean or degrading to them. Like most idiot dudes in their 20s that try this technique, he quickly discovered that it does not work and started to develop a bit of a reputation for himself. Now, despite many of his shortcomings, however, it does seem that he still did pretty well for himself in this department, if you know what I mean.
Well, he probably like mixed it up. He was probably like, okay, with her, I'm going to try. Is that a foxskin cap?
Absolutely.
Blah.
Absolutely. He was,
Your hat is stupid.
I would probably put him somewhere into the category of a Barney Stinson. Probably not as extreme, not as aggressive, not as insane or like overt, but like that level of like I have one thing on my mind and this is what I'm really into. I think at this time he was literally doing barely anything for his stockbroking firm. So I think his main entertainment was like trying to be
going out and
what they would call a pickup artist these days. I think that was sort of what he was like. So
it probably wasn't as intricate and planned out as a Barney Stinson con.
No, obviously
that was a show that was like absolutely exaggerated and
it was
crazy.
But me and my friends have actually been talking about this recently and how I still like How I Met Your Mother.
I do
it's
too.
exaggerated. It's right. It's hyper fantasy, and you should not model yourself after it. But we have all agreed that watching it again, we're like, there's a couple things where you're like, it's pretty deceptive and pretty like, dude, you straight up like conned a woman to sleep with her. It's pretty nasty.
Are we trying to say that TV shows are like reality? Because it's funny because the reality shows that are pretending to be reality aren't even reality. And like when we freak out about something that is clearly fiction,
I agree,
being fictional, then yeah. But like the thing that gets entertaining, if everything was just mundane, you wouldn't watch the show.
I agree.
And that's why they say it's a character.
I agree. I
still will laugh. The only one that really got me on How I Met Your Mother is The Naked Man, because that is so not good.
And that's what I'm saying.
And at the time we were like, oh, that's so funny.
And that's what I mean but if you watch it again,
works 2 out of 3 times.
It's funny, and I still think it's a funny episode. But it's those
that
types
one
of
I was
situations where
like
you
blushing.
watch the show and you're like, it's funny, but it's probably only going to be funny to us that watched it at the time.
I know, because
and watching it again now, people are going to be like, dude, you can't do this. Like, it's just not okay.
Yeah, I feel like I maybe said this, but like Gen Z has discovered Howard Stern.
Oh, yeah. Out of context, Howard Stern is really bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the holidays. I know this is going to come right out after the holidays, but you know the song "Baby It's Cold Outside."
Yes.
And everyone's like, "Oh my God, it's rape culture." No, it's not. It's a woman who wants to stay,
I agree.
having to outwardly be like, "I don't want to stay," and they're singing together, and they're actually like very happy. And anyone who is freaked out about that song needs to chill out.
I also am like, I'm sorry, but anybody that's ever dated knows this situation of the like, dude, there's tension here, and I don't really know. I don't want to like force anything. I don't want to push anything, but like, are you? I can't tell if you're giving me the hint. And there's this weird back and forth of like, well, no, but are you sure you want to go? You sure want to stick around? We can hang out and talk a little more.
It's like in that song, they definitely want to stay, and she's not allowed to because the society has said she can't, and so she has to put on the good girl show. And this is from like the 40s.
I like this.
And anybody who is, and actually in reality, people getting upset with her for doing this, it's like, she's having to do that because she isn't allowed to be a free woman that gets to do what she wants to do.
I agree.
So she has to pretend. And I saw like someone explaining it on the internet, and I was like, this is exactly the words. So anyway, but I don't think that's what Ian Fleming was necessarily doing with these ladies. He was just probably being a dog.
No, I don't want to dance around it.
He was a dog.
He was a dog, and he had many, I'm just going to say, misogynistic tendencies and thoughts. I don't think that he was a full-blown just like woman hater or anything, but we also have to consider this is the 30s and the 40s. This was not a time of like progressive men and how they treated women. So I don't think that it was this like, I'm not trying to make excuses for a guy that was treating women badly, but I do think it is important to just remember that I don't think that inherently Ian Fleming was just this like misogynistic jerk.
He wasn't a total bad guy.
No, I think that it was like many, I would even argue the majority of men at the time. He had been raised with certain ideals that society said this is how things are. And he went, okay, cool, that's how things are, and acted accordingly. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy because obviously he did some bad things, but we all have, like we've said many times.
The real problem is that now that things are changing,
Yes.
and people are being like, no, this isn't okay.
Right.
And people and women can be manipulative too. Let me just say that. I don't want to make
course.
it be one way or the other. I mean, his mom's kind of manipulative. Like she had that weird baby.
Absolutely.
So like I don't want to say it's like a double standard, but like the real problem, the real problem is that it's almost a century later and things are still slowly changing, even though we are so good at like putting things out there and like content that explains like this is good, this was bad, this is where we are now. And the people who are continuing to dig in their heels and be like, but this is a man's world, that is the real problem.
Yes, I do agree with that. And I also think
but
that
looking back then, just don't lose your mind about what happened 80 years ago.
And it's also very easy to
90.
It's very easy to point fingers at somebody and say how horrible they were 60 years in the grave.
Captain Hindsight.
Right? Yeah. Ian is not able to come out from the grave and go, yeah, you guys are right. It was a different time.
I was a dog,
totally wrong.
And I wouldn't do it that way.
I'm really glad that society has progressed in a way that now even I understand that my actions are wrong. He doesn't have that ability. The dude is dead. Yeah. So it's one of those things.
And we
of
also
like,
still got an amazing James Bond out of it. And the reality is anyone who's ever watched James Bond can tell he's always hooking up with at least 2 girls in the movie.
It's part of his persona.
That is the persona.
Right.
And it sells.
And we are going to talk about that a little bit later on too, and how even that was Ian being very hyperbolic. He was exaggerating too. That was not meant to be reality. But again, we're going to get there in like episode maybe 4 or 5.
Yes.
So.
Anyway, sorry, we didn't mean to get that was like mildly political almost, but
totally fine.
That's not what this podcast is. But anyway, keep going.
Now, in regards to these women that he was hooking up with occasionally and negging and all that kind of stuff, it was all really just a bit of fun, as he had no plans of committing to any one single partner. Throughout this time, Ian had continued to fiddle in his mind with the idea of writing thriller novels. In 1937, an author named Geoffrey Housegold released a piece of historic fiction called The Third Hour, in which the protagonist is swept up into the Mexican Revolution and discovers a cache of gold from a train that he and his fellow revolutionaries just blew up. The novel so greatly impressed Ian that he began to dream up his own scenarios for thrillers. One idea he had around this time was for a villainous, spider-like creature that sat upon a throne and lived on amphetamines. The amphetamine thing, by the way, was actually something that Ian would partake in occasionally, and even added it as a character trait of James Bond. Of note, in the book Moonraker from 1955, where Bond takes a hit of Benzedrine, which is a type of amphetamine, saying, quote, "I've got to keep my wits about me tonight."
I have something I want to contribute to this, but I'm like sort of thinking I shouldn't, but maybe I will.
Please do. I want to know.
Okay, so my grandfather was a neurosurgeon.
Okay.
And he died 5-6 years ago at 90. Okay?
Oh, wow. Ripe old age.
So he was born in 20-something.
Wow.
So he was younger than Ian Fleming, obviously. But he said that when he was in medical school, they were doing tests with amphetamines to see what they could do. And I think he said that he also did some amphetamines because they were on their residency rotations and they had to stay awake.
A lot of people actually theorize because Nazi Germany, as part of this, please correct me if I'm slightly off on this, but I'm fairly certain that standard issue rations for every single Nazi troop included amphetamines.
I did not know that.
And there's a theory from a lot of historians that basically say we all look back at the Holocaust and what the Nazis did and just go, how could we even let this happen? How did it happen? All just go, okay. And there's a lot of psychologists that will say different reasonings and everything like that, but there are a lot that will also go, yeah, but you also have to remember that the entire Nazi army was hopped up on amphetamines.
That makes sense.
And it does kind of track a little bit.
Without even knowing that, I still could see how it happened when the punishment for not falling in line was death.
Not true most of the time, actually.
I did not know that.
So there was a point where have you heard of the Einsatzgruppen?
No.
The Einsatzgruppen it's a horribly dark chapter, but it's more or less the group of Nazis that were formed to specifically go wrangle up and kill loose Jewish people that were on the run, or that were. It's like in Inglourious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino movie. It starts out with the Jewish family underneath the floorboards. Yes.
Those people.
The Einsatzgruppen, basically.
Okay.
But there's a story of basically when that group first formed, it was this battalion of troops, and they asked them all, hey, this is what we're going to do. Anybody not up for it? And of the giant battalion of people, like 10 dudes were like, I cannot do this. And they were put into just like cooking duty, and they were made fun of for the rest of the war. So it is one of these weird ones where like it depended. There were certain instances of like a direct command was like, hey, if you're disobeying this direct command when you've already agreed to be a part of this, I think there's probably instances where they would shoot a Nazi, but there were a lot of instances where they said, anybody who doesn't want to do this, let us know. And they said, no, we're good. That's the troubling thing to me.
Well, I mean, the other, we probably gotta move on, but like all of it and like being there and like, I don't know. I don't know what would happen. We weren't there, so we can't totally speculate because as much as you're saying that, and then it's like, oh, yikes. But like, I do think that it was a scary time, and not listening to what they were saying, probably there were threats. I don't know. And they were killing people. So like, it might not be that they were like, yeah, I will happily go round up these people. It was more like, yeah, I'll do it because I don't really know what's going to happen to me if I say no. I don't know. We're so speculative right now.
Oh, and yeah, I was just about to say, I am so uneducated on this topic, truly, that like the knowledge that I'm dispensing is more or less anecdotal. So I wouldn't, for anybody listening to this, take this as like hard fact of this kind of stuff.
Email us if you want to give us any enlightened,
and
educated...
there are books literally written all about just the psychology of how it was possible that the Nazis could do what they could do. So anyway, different story. But let's get back into
to the thing. I don't know. Some of these like ancillary topics are so interesting though, and that's why we're like squirrel.
And we kind of have to too, because we're getting into World War II, and you can't talk about World War II without talking
about World War II,
right? The Nazis and stuff. So, in early 1938, Ian began to attend more parties and get-togethers hosted by Maud Russell. You remember her as one of Ian's long-term affairs, and Maud's husband, Gilbert, was the one who took Ian under his wing to become the merchant banker.
Oh, gosh. I still cannot believe that he did that.
It's horrible. Through his interactions with Maud, Ian met a man named Conrad O'Brien French, who had been working for an independent intelligence service for some time.
It's not Conrad O'Brien Irish? I mean, I was surprised when you said the last name. I was baffled that it was French.
I didn't even think about that. That's really funny. Conrad O'Brien, you would think.
Or like something else.
Conrad
like
O'Brien Kelly.
McCarthy.
Something, yeah. That's pretty funny. So, O'Brien French, he had been working for an independent intelligence service. So after striking up a friendship, Ian began to consider intelligence services as a possible option for himself in the future, especially given that the outbreak of war was quickly becoming a very real possibility, and the general public was very much aware of it. Ian and Conrad became fast friends, which led Conrad to open up to Ian more about his experience in intelligence. Over the next couple of years, Ian traveled back to Germany and Austria often, and although Ian made no note of it anywhere in his writings, we do know that he swung by Berlin at least once during this time to speak with the British embassy. Now, we know this because the embassy kept the intelligence reports that Ian dropped off that detailed his thoughts on the current political and economic climate of Germany and the surrounding countries. Colonel Noel Mason McFarlane, which is also a great name.
Everybody has great names.
Every single person. Kat says her theory when I said that to her the other day, she goes, it's because they all have 3 names.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you might be right about that. 3 names sound epic. Mm-hmm. Now, Colonel Noel Mason McFarlane, who was serving as military attachment to the British embassy in Berlin and who read through the reports, didn't think too much of Ian's work and noted, quote, young Fleming is gullible and of poor and unbalanced judgment.
Well, maybe not.
We'll see if the colonel ends up being right about this. Now, while in Austria, one very important event happens that will stick with Ian for the rest of his life. Now, over the past few years, through various social engagements, Ian had occasionally and briefly crossed paths with a young English girl named Anne Charteris, though at the time of him meeting her, she was married to Lord Shane O'Neill, so her name was actually Anne O'Neill. Now, while golfing with a friend, Ian was invited to the vacation home where Lord O'Neill and Anne were staying, and Ian accepted. Though neither Anne nor Ian make any note of it in their later writings, a close friend to both of them named Nin Ryan, who was at the vacation house too, later said that there was no doubt that Ian was there specifically for Anne and marked the start date of their affair as that time at the vacation house in Austria in the summer of 1938.
Okay.
Now, Nin, by the way, Nin Ryan, I had to look this up, is somehow short for Margaret.
My mother-in-law's named Margaret.
Riddle me this. How do you get to Nin from Margaret? I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting. Now, by this point in our series, Ian has had quite a few affairs with married women and quite a few girlfriends/flings, a good number of which I have completely skipped over. Yes, but I mention Anne Charteris because in 14 years' time from this point in our story, Anne would become the one and only wife that Ian Fleming would ever have.
Oh.
For what it's worth, Anne had gotten married in 1932, which was 6 years earlier, when she was just 19 years old. And by the time she started up her affair with Ian, it was actually her second affair, as the marriage with her husband had fallen apart. And from what I understand, Lord O'Neill, Shane O'Neill, had been unfaithful as well. So this wasn't like her just being devious.
Cheating all around.
It was they were both cheating on each other, and so it was like, well, it is what it is. By early 1939, it had become clear to the world that war was imminent. With the aid of his brother Peter, who is an employee of the Times, Ian was able to secure a temporary position as a journalist in Moscow. Now, Peter Fleming had already started working part-time for the British military intelligence. So when I say that Ian got a temporary job with the Times through his brother, I actually mean that he got an offer to kind of try out for a job with the British Foreign Office as a spy.
Oh, a spy audition.
Uh-huh. Now, to do this, he worked with his brother Peter to get a job as a quote-unquote journalist for the Times, but this was all seemingly done in the hopes of getting the attention of the British intelligence office. While in Moscow, the only other British journalist that was sent along with Ian noticed that Ian would only type his notes when the Russians looked away, and said it was clear that Ian was, quote, only ostensibly representing the Times. Pretty cool. During his time in Moscow, Ian covered the diplomatic discussions that Britain was having with the Soviet Union in the hopes that they might continue with their anti-fascist ways. The talks didn't go great, and Ian noted that there were almost definitely microphones hidden in the walls to record everything.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Once back in London, in order to keep up appearances of legitimacy, Ian wrote a small handful of unsuccessful articles for the Times before finally writing his comprehensive essay on the military power of the Soviet Union, the potential they had to dominate, and how the Allied forces could use them, with caution, as an ally. The Times was unimpressed with his thoughts and rejected the essay outright. But Ian knew he was right and doubled down on himself by sending a copy of the essay to a friend in the Foreign Office named Philip Nichols. The essay proceeded to be passed around the Soviet spy department within the British military office, and on May 2nd, 1939, Ian made his way to the Foreign Office's Northern Department to meet with a man named Lawrence Collier, who was the department head. Collier later noted that Ian was, quote, a man of good judgment. And though they seemingly did not offer Ian any kind of a job initially, they thanked him for his work and asked him to keep it up. Ian continued his work with the Times for a few more months, acting as a pseudo-intelligence collector, but by mid-1939 was being tapped on the shoulder to start as a part-time assistant to the Naval Admiral John Godfrey.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Naval Admiral John Godfrey was part of the Naval Intelligence Division, or NID. And we're going to be saying NID a good amount moving forward, so Naval Intelligence Division, and I'll be sure to reiterate that as we move forward. So he was, again, part of the Naval Intelligence Division, and is a person you'll probably want to remember, as he would one day serve as the foundation for the fictional leader of James Bond's MI6 that Ian would name M, in tribute to the nickname his mother had given him as a child.
Interesting.
So John Godfrey, as we move forward and talk about him, remember, he is M.
Okay.
Okay. As for the Naval Intelligence Division, Ian's time working with them would come to serve as the primary source of inspiration for the inner workings of MI6 in the James Bond universe. Not only would Ian's personal experience with NID provide source material for future creative writings, but NID's own history would aid as well. Fun little factoid for you, Aubrey. During the First World War, NID was successfully able to intercept and decipher the infamous Zimmerman telegram.
Okay.
What's the Zimmerman telegram, you might be asking?
I was like, am I supposed to know the Zimmerman telegram?
Well, in January of 1917, Germany was eager to cut off the flow of supplies from the United States to Britain. So the Germans sent an encrypted telegram to Mexico proposing an alliance and stated that if Mexico did accept, Germany would then help take back Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico from the United States.
What?
Yes. The Naval Intelligence Division was able to intercept this message, decipher it, and then send it to the U.S. government, which ultimately led to the U.S. entering World War I.
I did not know that.
Freaking crazy, right? Now check this out. The cracking of the Zimmerman telegram is considered to be a turning point for the war and is one of the earliest examples of an intelligence breakthrough swaying world events. I bring up this story because as the team of British intelligence officers worked on cracking the Zimmerman telegram, the code number assigned to the document was 0070.
Okay, I just was like drawing a 007 in the air, like, and shaking my arms around.
Crazy cool, right? So literally in tribute to the NID's first triumph as an organization, Ian would later name James Bond's secret agent character 007 in tribute.
Interesting.
Freaking radical, right?
That's crazy. So when you were saying this, if that, let's say that telegram had just made it and then like Mexico tried to take Texas back with the help of Germany.
Yes.
So many of my relatives lived in Texas at that time. And some of yours probably too. You were saying, yeah.
Well, at least Louisiana, that's where my mom's from.
Yeah. Well, all of my grandparents, my great grandparents, and all those other people too that
all
were
from Texas.
My grandmother was born in Arkansas, but lived in Texas. Grew up in Dallas. So this would have been. They were born. I can't remember. 26, 27, 28, 29, around there. So at that point in time, they would have been there.
Undoubtedly.
For sure.
Yes.
In middle school and high school.
But your look of shock, I had no idea about that either.
That's so crazy.
So that is how desperate Germany was getting in World War I.
They were
reaching out to Mexico.
I know.
Saying, please help us stop the U.S. from shipping supplies to Britain because we can't do this with them anymore. And that was literally the thing that made the U.S. go, oh, shoot. They're trying to get people close to us to attack us? Okay, we got to go into this. And they started sending over ships. That was what happened. So
that is crazy.
That made my nerd heart just, go crazy. Uh-huh. Now, within just 2 weeks, Ian proved his aptitude for military intelligence, and in late July of 1939 was assigned to the Intelligence and Meteorology Department of the newly formed Special Branch of the Wavy Navy. It's the nickname of the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. I just laugh at you people from the UK. You cannot resist a rhyme.
The Wavy Navy.
You cannot resist it. It's like if a rhyme is there, it is like peak British anything. It's what's this? Oh, the Wavy Navy. I just thought that was adorable.
I love the Wavy Navy.
Now, a month after that, Ian was working full-time for the department and had gathered enough insider information to fully realize that Europe was on the very razor's edge of erupting out into full-on war. Ian saw the writing on the wall so plainly that he wrote to his old pal Percy Muir telling him to move his entire book collection out of London.
Oh, wow.
Which is super smart. And then a second letter to his close friend Gerald Koch, informing him that he would not be able to serve as best man for his wedding scheduled on September 2nd.
Okay.
History nerds out there probably just felt a shudder, as September 1st, 1939 was the day that Hitler began the invasion of Poland.
Okay.
September 2nd, Poland officially declared war on Germany, and on September 3rd, which was Gerald Koch's wedding day, Neville Chamberlain declared war between Britain and Germany, and with the stroke of a pen, World War II started.
Okay.
Insane. So literally Ian saw that so clearly that he was like,
sorry, man.
Cannot do this. We are so close to this being exploding. You know what I mean? And
gosh.
it was right on that day. Now that the war was fully underway, the need for intelligence reports and analytics skyrocketed. At the end of September, Admiral John Godfrey circulated a memo that history would come to call the Trout Memo. In it, the memo compares wartime espionage to fly fishing and goes on to list 54 ways in which fly fishing tactics can be applied to deception. Although Godfrey published it under his name, most historians believe it was indeed Ian Fleming who wrote the memo.
Interesting.
If you look at the memo and you read it, it's like, yeah, that's him. There's no way it's not. It's like, it is. You
can just hear his voice.
You can hear it. It's,
yeah.
Authors have certain ways of writing, and you read this memo and it's like, yep, that is undoubtedly Ian Fleming. So, and it's a very important document as well. Now let's see here. In November of 1939, the head of the SIS, or MI6, Admiral Sir Hugh Sinclair, died. And the department fell into disarray. As a result, the NID, remember the Naval Intelligence Division, was being asked to operate in capacities way beyond their original intent. And before long, Admiral John Godfrey was being asked to take charge of the OIC, or Operational Intelligence Center, which gave him the title of Director of Naval Intelligence. The OIC was responsible for collecting and analyzing the movement of every enemy ship at sea, then sending out those reports to High Command so that British ships could avoid enemy conflict or engage appropriately. Due to his newfound rank, Rear Admiral John Godfrey was able to form his own personal think tank of bright-minded men and women, some with storied military backgrounds, while others were just plain civilians, like Ian. The group would eventually come to be known as Section 17 and would meet in the private quarters of Admiral Godfrey's ship, known as Room 39. Hopefully you're starting to see the James Bond influences here. Their job was to oversee all naval intelligence reports coming in, and they would often be asked to rapidly respond to personal requests from Winston Churchill, who is currently serving as the First Lord of the Admiralty under Neville Chamberlain. Remember, Churchill wouldn't become Prime Minister until 1940.
Okay.
This is one of those amazing examples, in my opinion, of how funny life can be, because if you'll remember, Winston Churchill was good enough friends with Ian's father, Val, and his brother Philip, that he affectionately called them the Flamingos.
Yes, the Flamingos. And
even wrote a heartfelt obituary for Val that was published in the Times. Now, that man's son was personally analyzing intelligence reports for him while the nation was at war.
That's really cool.
Isn't that wild?
Okay, I just am rethinking that. I mean, the nickname Flamingo is so funny because, like, if you had a friend named Fleming, you'd be like, "Hey, Flamingo."
It's perfect. It's
better than Flim.
It's true. Or Fleming. Fleming sounds like phlegm in your throat.
I know. It's like, ugh.
Exactly. And that's Churchill for you, man. That guy had a way. He had a way with words. By September 8th, Ian was promoted to commander, which gave him the official ranking ability to address anyone, from an admiral to a cabinet member, and Ian continued to serve as assistant/public liaison to Admiral Godfrey. His friends noted that though he was now a high rank in the military, it didn't go to his head, and he did not treat anyone beneath him poorly. Think of when your coworker gets promoted to manager and then they become jerks, you know? Mm-hmm. That was not Ian. He was like the friend that gets promoted and is super chill.
Like it.
Now, Godfrey really developed a respect for Ian over the coming months and began to trust him with more and more responsibilities. Years later, when Ian was asked to describe what he did during the war, he responded with a rather wordy and vague description, which is very telling as to his work. And he says, quote, "I was a convenient channel for confidential matters connected with subversive organizations, and for undertaking confidential missions abroad, either alone or with the DNI." So vague. So vague.
He could have gone into politics.
And by the way, I did write DNI, and it's weird because sometimes people will say in their writings DNI, and other times they say it's NID. Mm-hmm. Now, from what I can gather, DNI is Department of Naval Intelligence. It's the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. NID, DNI. So if that's ever, if you ever read anything anywhere, know that it seems like they're
probably
exactly the same.
Interchangeable.
So good was Ian at intelligence planning that his boss, Rear Admiral John Godfrey, would later say, quote, "Ian should have been the DNI, and I, his naval advisor."
Oh.
So I just want to really briefly address that. Think about this for a moment. John Godfrey is arguably the most powerful person in the British Navy. And he years later said, "Ian Fleming should have been my commander." In other words, Ian Fleming was one of the most powerful people in the British Navy during all of World War II.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable.
Well, and like unbelievable considering this kind of like bumbling, floating around, like
that's what I'm saying.
Total hodgepodge of things that he had done, but that was what got him to the point where he was suited for this position.
Exactly. It's like it was clandestine. It was like meant to be.
So kids, when you're out there and you're like, I don't know what I want to do, just keep doing things.
Yes. Literally just keep going. And actually, such was his confidence in Ian that he soon began to allow him to pursue his own intelligence plans and even put Ian in charge of the DNI's relationship with MI6.
Oh.
So effectively, Ian was running MI6 for a good portion of World War II.
Nice.
I couldn't even believe it. I have goosebumps right now. That's so exciting to me. So social life was obviously limited during this time, but Ian did manage to find time to play bridge, which he did often. It was about once a week. Every so often, Anne would be invited to the same game through a mutual friend, and the two got to spend some secret social time together. Mm-hmm. There was also an air raid warden named Muriel Wright, whom Ian would occasionally call upon. As she lived not too far from his apartment, but most of his life at this point really was wrapped up into war-related affairs, as opposed to... Affair-related affairs. That is, except for golf.
Well, I think that most people who are into golf
understand this.
They make time for golf.
Yes, golf people they're a breed.
They're very golfy.
It's like, I used to think that basketballers were the most hardcore of the sports players, but I don't know, man. I think golfers are just like, if they don't golf, they'll go insane.
My Uncle Howard is that guy. He loves golf. It's like golf is... definitely a part. Okay, let me tell you, I had a blonde moment at the beginning of this series, and let me just tell you a blonde moment about golf for me.
Okay.
So I'm helping Aaron move for the second time in our relationship when he was moving into the house that we live in now.
Yeah.
He's got 3 sets of golf clubs. He has golfed 3 times since I've known him. People just give him golf clubs, which is great because he didn't go buy golf clubs. So they're like, oh, here's my old golf clubs. These are better. You can have it. Which people just, sure, keep giving him golf clubs.
I need those friends. I need a set of golf clubs.
So I'm like... helping him move, and I'm being like fast Aubrey, like da, 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 da. And I'm pulling stuff, and there's this one glove, and I'm like, here, this one glove, we don't even have the other glove. He's like, it's a golf glove, Aubrey, you only have one of them. And I did not know that. So Ian Fleming would have been like, you're dumb.
Hey, I don't know about that though, because there was a point in the 90s where baseball players started to wear 2 batting gloves and everybody made fun of them. They were like, what? You only need to wear 1 batting glove. And now it is de facto standard. Every batter wears 2 gloves. So I don't know.
Okay, well, maybe some people whose golf game needs improvement, they should try on another glove.
I have no... I mean, I really don't know. But it just seems like one of those where it's like, who knows? It might be in like another year. Somebody goes, I'm going to try it with 2. And then in 5 years, it's going to be standard. And Aaron's going to eat his words.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
But anyway, yeah, golf is like part of a personality.
It is. And for Ian, it literally never stopped. He always had to. But oddly, this actually ended up being a good thing, as Ian was a social expert. He made friends really easily. And through the golf clubs he frequented, he was able to make loads of connections that would come to aid in the war effort, even recruiting several people to join the Department of Naval Intelligence. So I hate to say it, but it was almost like the golf clubs attracted it's probably rude to say at the time, at least a probably more educated crowd of people.
Yeah, it's not a poor man's game.
No, and so it was probably the talent density was probably a lot more high.
This is why when I was young and in college and right after college, it was like, you need to learn how to play golf, or otherwise you're not going to be there when people are like networking and stuff. I tried once. I had a lesson from the pro at a course up near Fort Collins, and I was terrible. Like, I just can't hit the ball.
I get the yips. That's my main thing. If you left me alone, I could probably play a decent round of golf. But if somebody's looking at me, it's just like I shake and I get all nervous.
Maybe I should try by myself, but I literally can't. It's like when I swing the club and it comes down, I might hit the ball. Like,
it's really tough.
I don't have the hand-eye coordination. I've always excelled at things like yoga, where it's just me.
Yeah, I could see that. I tend to be the same way. If it's a group activity, I always struggled in sports as a kid because I just would get frustrated and I was always chunky and never as fast as everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I was not picked first for dodgeball, let me tell you that.
I was actually really good at dodgeball, and then I got a reputation for being good, and then that was like the only time in my entire existence as a child that I would get picked relatively early in the picking category. Every other time I was picked last.
I was okay at Foursquare. I was pretty good at Foursquare.
I was good at Foursquare too, but we had a Foursquare gang, so it was like there was no option. It was like there were 4 of us, and we would always play. You know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I kind of like play Foursquare. That would be or tetherball. Oh, I love tetherball.
I hated tetherball because I'm 5'7", and if you're short, tetherball sucks.
Well, I mean, if you're playing against another short person, I mean, I always like tetherball.
I didn't like tetherball because as soon as they got it into the trajectory where it would spin above my head,
yeah.
It was just like, okay, game over. There's nothing I can even do, you know?
I don't know. Now I kind of want to go play tetherball and Foursquare. We can do that. Okay, keep going.
That was a weird sidebar.
From golf to tetherball.
Now, Ian's reputation was also growing inside of the military community, and on one occasion, when Admiral Sir Dudley Pound could not find a magnifying glass to review some surveillance photos, Ian handed him a clear glass bottle to do the job instead. Admiral Pound asked who he was, and when he responded, Admiral Pound said back, quote, "Ah, I see. Fleming. You're one of those chaps who can see in the dark." Which I think is awesome.
Also, Admiral Pound sounds like the newest member of the game Clue.
I was going to say it sounds like the head of the household from Boogie Nights.
Maybe. I don't know. I was going to the game Clue. It's like Colonel Mustard and Admiral Pound.
That's true. That does actually sound like a Clue character. Now, as the war progressed, the Naval Intelligence Division, NID, found itself amassing more and more responsibilities, especially given that MI6 was producing such lackluster results at the time. Because of this, Room 39 had a constant flow of agents and spies trying to establish themselves as part of the outfit. Ian, being the personal assistant to Admiral Godfrey, was the gatekeeper to everything and was able to personally vet every agent that walked through the door.
He's the NID bouncer?
He literally is the NID bouncer. Among these agents who walked into the office was a man named Sefton Delmer, who initially proposed the idea of using disinformation, gossip, and propaganda as a tool for espionage.
Ooh, interesting.
This is really where luck meets opportunity and maybe just a dash of magic, because so much of Ian's life previously seems to have led up to this exact moment. As soon as he understood the concept of what Sefton was explaining, Ian's imaginative and creative mind began to spin up all kinds of creative scenarios. Before long, Ian had a laundry list of ideas that he was constantly pitching to Godfrey. Some of his first ideas include 1. Fake coins that had the German currency mark on one side and then a propaganda message on the other. 2. Forging millions of dollars in German currency to overinflate its value and cripple the economy from within.
Like that.
And 3. Sending out a nearly empty ship to the North Sea, outfitted with a radio broadcaster that overloaded the German airwaves with propaganda, which would then draw the artillery fire of the German battery away from the British vessels and towards the ship broadcasting the radio signal.
Love it. Red herring?
That last scenario, by the way, was actually approved and executed.
Awesome.
Super sweet. And by the way, this is something I try to tell creative people all the time. We've kind of been touching on this throughout this whole series, but just because you might not be able to create the thing that you want in this exact moment, it doesn't mean you can't be exercising your skills and honing them wherever you are. Ian was literally using his gifts as a creative writer to dream up espionage missions that ultimately saved lives during World War II.
That's really cool.
Pretty cool, man. In fact, Ian's literary influences couldn't help but burst out from within him as he soon started referring to his scenarios as plots. So for anybody that's out there that's ever heard somebody say, "Oh yes, there's a plot to kill the Prime Minister," Ian Fleming coined that term
He coined
in
the
real life.
term. Interesting. Because I think of schemes.
Schemes, yeah, plots.
But plots.
So, yeah, if you ever hear a secret agent saying like, "Oh yes, there's this new plot on how this can happen," it literally during World War II, Ian Fleming
because it was a
coined
story
this.
that they made up and it was the plot of the okay.
And it came from a creative writer.
Interesting.
Isn't that
That's
awesome?
super cool.
Yeah. Now, in regards to plots, the next big plot came in early 1940 with the blocking of the Danube River. See, the British wanted to cut off the Germans' access to Romania, as Romania was their only source, or really I should say one of their primary sources, for oil, among many other resources, and the Danube River was the main supply line, commonly known as the Iron Gates, which is a pretty cool name.
Iron Gates.
Now, the plan was twofold. First, they were going to buy up a bunch of shipping companies along the Danube, thus denying Germans their use. And then second, they were going to send a bunch of those ships north along the river towards Germany, fill them with concrete blocks, then sink them into the water, making the river unusable as a supply line.
Interesting.
Given that the entire plot was being pushed by Admiral Godfrey, Ian found himself working with everyone involved, including one of the key agents, Merlin Minshall, who was dispatched as the boots-on-the-ground agent in Budapest. However, it doesn't seem that the early days of spies are quite what we imagine them to be, as the whole mission ended up being a bit of a fumble.
Uh-oh.
Initially, things went well. With help of some Australian agents, Merlin Minshall was successfully able to rent the barges needed and then send them on their way north. Now, I can't find out why, but soon after, Minshall was actually arrested. And even worse, he pretty quickly tried to bargain for his release by letting the police know that he was an officer of the British Navy.
So he didn't have a cyanide capsule stuck in his tooth.
No,
he just
did not.
flipped.
He was like, "Oh yes, no, I'm a British. You should let me go.
I'm
indeed."
very important.
Like, yes, like that kind of a thing. Now the police soon let Minshall go, so he headed to a British speedboat that Ian had secretly planted. But just 100 miles from the destination of the barges, Minshall's speedboat ran out of fuel.
Uh-oh.
Maybe not such a coincidence, because shortly after this, the Romanian police showed up, accompanied by some Nazis, who arrested Minshall again and took him up to the barges, where they soon discovered the plot to sink them. While the whole mission was a pretty glaring failure, this next part is really cool.
Okay.
So Merlin Minshall wasn't quite ready to surrender, and in a brilliantly simple move, he asked the authorities if he might be allowed to change into his formal Navy attire if he was to be taken in, to which they agreed.
So polite.
So polite. Minshall seized the opportunity and managed not only to escape, but evade his pursuers long enough to steal a few canisters of boat fuel, commandeer a vehicle, and covertly drive the 100-mile journey back to his thirsty Type 2 63 HSL speedboat that again had been arranged for him by Ian. See, Merlin needed this exact boat as he knew it was the only one fast enough to outperform his pursuers. He was able to make it back to his speedboat undetected, but just when Minshall finished topping up his speedboat with fuel, the Nazis arrived.
No!
For more than 2 hours, Minshall hauled ass down the Danube River, outrunning a gang of Nazis and Romanian communists, dodging bullets, weaving in and out of civilian ship lanes, all before ultimately shaking his pursuers and arriving safely in Trieste, Italy.
Wow!
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
So crazy, right?
So crazy.
Now, though this mission was technically a failure, it really pissed off Joseph Goebbels, who was not at all bothered by the systematic extermination of millions of Jewish people, but was indeed bothered that the British would try to use a neutral country like Romania in their plot to block the Danube River.
A neutral country. Oh, poor Romania.
Also, just in case you were wondering, although there truly is no singular person from Ian's life that can be solely credited as the source of inspiration for the James Bond character, Merlin Minshall was indeed amongst the earliest personal acquaintances that Ian drew upon when creating James Bond many years later.
I mean, you can't make that story up.
It's just too cool, right?
It's so cool. But like, also it makes me think of like, you know how in the movies, like they're always like talking for a while and stuff. And it's like, oh, I really must change.
Yes, if I am going to be... But you have to think about that situation, too. He had to, kind of befriend them enough to get them to trust him that, oh, no, he is this proper British person who's just, okay, they've accepted they need to go in, but if they're going to do it, we know the British, they're proper. Okay, we'll let you change in your stuff. And then and I can't imagine that they were loosey-goosey. I can't imagine they were like, sure, go on into the house and come out in 10 minutes.
Just turn yourself back in.
It had to have been like go in this room, we'll wait outside, and he figured out how to escape.
That's awesome.
It's radical. Like, it is literally one of those, you cannot make this type of story up. It's just so cool, you know? Now, I should also add that I'm going to be very selective moving forward with the war/spy stories that I'm going to share about Ian, as there are a lot, most of which never made it past the idea phase, many of which never made it past the approval phase, and of the few that were approved as missions, many of them were canceled before they even started due to some kind of logistical problem. In one example, Ian dreamt up a plot in which a group of German-speaking English soldiers would disguise themselves as Nazi troops, fake the crash of a German bomber in the English Channel, then lure in a Nazi patrol boat for the purposes of overtaking the crew and stealing an Enigma machine.
Ooh.
I probably don't have to explain what an Enigma machine is, but for anyone that doesn't know, it was an encryption device used by the Nazis to communicate in secret and was notoriously difficult to crack because it was continuously being improved upon by Nazi engineers. And you're waving your arms.
You know my favorite show, Bones?
Oh, God, yes. Tell me.
They have this like serial killer who's like a hacker and he's able to like get into anything. He's got every camera that's around. He could be like watching us from your laptops, all this stuff. And so one of the guys who's kind of a conspiracy theorist, he's also like a bazillionaire.
Okay.
And he has an Enigma machine.
Cool.
And he has two. And he brings one to the lab and one to the FBI and says we can only communicate through the Enigma machine.
That's
so
cool.
I just learned about that like a couple weeks ago.
I would love an Enigma machine. Love one.
Well,
Oh
you
my
need
gosh.
two, I guess, because it's got to be able to communicate with some other Enigma machine.
I don't want to communicate with it. I just think it's an amazing historical artifact.
I
You
want
know
to
what
play
mean?
walkie-talkie with the Enigma machine.
Well, then let's see if we can track down 2 Enigmas. We'll have some fun.
I think it's going to be a pretty penny to get some of those.
Oh, I know. Gosh, I can't imagine those things are like they're probably impossible to come by. And then if you can't,
But
find
that's
one,
why
they're
they wanted
so
one so
expensive.
that they could communicate with them, right? Like to communicate with the
Well,
like
right,
and
so-
listen in and whatever they were doing,
Yes.
or figure out how to decode, or they needed it to figure it out.
Yes and no. So that was the thing about Enigma. There have been so many movies and books written about the Enigma machine and everything. But more or less, it was an encryption device that they could continuously add bits to make it more and more and more and more and more complicated and hard to crack. So even when the British or any intelligence agency, the Polish were really good at it, even when they figured out how to crack one version of it, it was like a month later, the Nazis were like, yeah, here's version 2. And it was all the work was done. It was just like, nope, now you're done. Now you have to start over. It doesn't work anymore. So Enigma was an insane little device.
It was an enigma.
It literally was. It was enigmatic, I guess you would say. So now this whole plot I'm talking about, by the way, to sort of fake this German bomber in the English Channel, this plot was okayed by the Admiralty, and Ian himself was going to lead the mission. Remember, his German was near perfect due to all of his years studying it. Now, despite overcoming every roadblock that he possibly could to get this mission off the ground, everything was eventually approved and executed, but after waiting in the channel for several days, no Nazi boats appeared to rescue the fake Nazi crew, so the mission was canceled.
The trap was set, but nobody
and nobody
cared.
took the bait. So that's kind of what I mean, is there's a lot of other stories that are sort of like that. This is really the only one that Ian got to really... There's one other that he got to participate in, but this is really one of the only ones that he was like part of the actual mission. A lot of his other work during World War II was trying to get missions executed, and again, for one reason or another, it just didn't get approved. So that's why I say I'm not going to go over all these ones that didn't ever get approved, because sort of what's the point, you know?
I mean, I wonder though if some of those ones that didn't get approved would have worked.
Oh, I mean... He had a ton of crazy ideas. Like there's literally, I found like on the website, there's a list of all these different things that he dreamt up and things that never
Super
happened,
cool.
but they were just like, he had a ton of ideas. And by the way, this feeling of being a spy, because he was just on this whole little espionage mission that didn't quite take off, really seemed to have rung Ian's bell, as he started carrying a small, concealable sidearm that was not standard military issue, along with a small commando knife and, no joke, a fountain pen that when you clicked the top would release tear gas.
That is like, be careful.
So radical, I can't even tell you how cool that is.
That is so cool. Was the sidearm a Walther PP?
No, it was almost definitely a Beretta, because James Bond's initial sidearm was a Beretta, and it didn't get changed until like 6 books in, because a fan wrote to Ian and said, yo, that's a stupid gun for a secret agent to have. He needs to have a small, concealed, little teeny one, and then he changed to the Walther PPK.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But
But hey, I knew something about James Bond
yes, But all of Ian's years in basically working with the Secret Service for the British government, they were carrying, I'm 99% sure they were Berettas that they were carrying.
Whatever was a standard issue,
Right.
something. Yeah, okay.
I don't even know if that was standard issue. It was just like, it was the preferred gun for certain reasons. I'm not a gun person, people, so don't get mad at me for this.
I'll
but
see if I
it
can
was-
find anything out about that, actually. 'Cause
Sure. I've been trying to find a decommissioned one because I don't like, I'm sorry, everybody, I'm not a gun person. I don't really like guns, mostly because I like to play with things that I get. So if I get a gun, I'm just be sitting on the couch playing with a gun, and that is a stupid thing, and I don't want to do that.
You can also just not buy ammunition.
True, but I would also just rather get like a decommissioned PPK because then I know that there's just zero possibility of me fiddling with it, that anything could ever possibly happen. So anyways, just saying, I think that'd be neat. If anybody has one they want to give me, just let me know.
I just want to give you.
I don't know if you can send somebody a gun. That would be terrible. All right. Now, while nobody can really say for certain, I personally believe that it was right around this time that the initial seeds for writing thriller novels, specifically about a secret spy for the British government, first began to sprout in the mind of Ian Fleming. And I think he started to take note, consciously or subconsciously, of the various characters, politics, tactics, plots, subplots, and inner workings of the global spy community. And yes, I say spy community because I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is.
Now, by this time in our story, we're arriving in early June of 1940. World War II buffs will know that from May 26th to June 4th of 1940, more than 300,000 British troops were evacuated from Dunkirk, France, as the Nazi armies pressed them against the shores of the English Channel. Just weeks before this, a German spy who is sympathetic to the British leaked a top-secret German military initiative to attack the town of Southend, which is about an hour's drive east from London. Now, this part is really odd to me. So officials found out this report. They didn't really know what to make of the German, of like this German guy, this spy being sympathetic to them. So they sent Ian and his brother Peter to investigate Southend a day or so later. When they got there, they found the beach town in full-on holiday mode with vacationers soaking up the non-existent English sunshine on the beaches. So they decided that an impending attack was probably not likely and just kind of went back to London. Yeah, like literally they got intelligence saying, dude, Southend is going to get it. And they went there and everybody was having a good time. They went, yeah, they were fine, and went back.
Did this end well?
Well, considering that the London Blitz spanned like 9 months, and we'll get into that in a second, no, this did not end well. They're stupid, and they should have taken a lot more precautions. I don't know what they were thinking when this happened.
Obviously the people wouldn't know. They would just be doing whatever they're doing.
Exactly. That's why this makes no sense to me. It was like, okay, just because something's happening right now doesn't mean it's not going to be happening in a week. So what is your deal here? So anyway, I couldn't figure that one out.
Doesn't make much sense.
Now, like a week later, on June 13th, Ian was sent off to Paris with another eventual James Bond inspiration named Peter Smithers. In Paris, Ian and Smithers, and yes, I'm thinking of The Simpsons too, were to report to, you guessed it, yet another source of James Bond inspiration in a man named Biffy Dunderdale.
Biffy Dunderdale?
Biffy Dunderdale. It's the greatest freaking name.
What kind of name is Biffy?
Well, check this out. Wilfred, or Biffy Dunderdale, was a Ukrainian-born son of an English fish magnate, so he had dual citizenship and grew up speaking both Russian and English, but spoke with a heavy Russian accent. Biffy earned his nickname after a successful stretch of boxing matches. For anyone who doesn't know this, the word biff is actually a noun that means a heavy punch.
Oh, I always thought Biff was missing.
Exactly. It is a heavy punch. So if you think about Back to the Future, they call him Biff. It means he just hits you really hard. I
always thought that you biffed it, which meant like you missed it.
It is one of those Nimrod situations. Bugs Bunny called Elmer Fudd a Nimrod, and we all thought he was calling him stupid, but Nimrod means skilled hunter.
Okay.
Yep. It's one of those weird...
You learn something new every day.
Things. So yeah, it's real. You can always correct people now. They go, quit being a Nimrod. And you go, well, thank you. I am a skilled hunter. It's pretty funny. But we all,
I'm gonna go home and call Aaron a Nimrod when I walk in.
You should. And he would go,
like,
hey.
What?
And you go, hey, look it up.
What? Although I don't know if he's actually a Nimrod. I'm like, when he goes, he's like, oh, we didn't get anything. And he goes, that's why they call it hunting and not killing.
I like it. So yes, Biff means a heavy punch. So in other words, Biffy can kick your ass.
It's kind of a funny, it's like an opposite sort of sounding name too. Like Biff kind of sounds a little like
Yeah.
just like a whiff.
Dismissal.
Yeah, like
Totally.
Biff, like
It does. Now, just a few months prior, in August of 1939, Biffy, through his network of connections across Europe, had learned that a small team of Polish mathematicians had cracked the Nazis' Enigma code and had even built schematics for replicating the machine. He was then successfully able to get both the code formula and the schematics back to the team of intelligence personnel at Bletchley Park. History nerds will know, however, that this breakthrough with the Enigma machine was brief, as the Nazis were, again, extremely good at constantly evolving Enigma, which quickly made the code formula obsolete.
So you think that's how that Microsoft got inspired to like do new releases constantly and always mess up whatever you're doing, like especially on a Monday morning?
Maybe. They got it from the Nazis. Now we know.
Obviously. That's a new conspiracy theory that someone's going to take and then like totally go out of control with. Like
I hope that's not true, because Bill Gates seems like a good guy.
No, it just made me think of like software updates and how it can
true.
totally screw stuff up. Like, Apple, why did you switch the mute and the speaker button? Like, why?
I agree. Oh my gosh. Now, regardless, Biffy had impressed the right people and for the past few months had been a top agent in Paris. But by June 14th of 1940, Paris would become completely overtaken by the Nazis. And remember, Ian flew into Paris on June 13th.
Oh, wait, so he was there?
He literally flew into Paris the day before the Nazis completely took it.
Holy bajoli.
Yeah. For the next 2 weeks, Ian led the evacuation of MI6's safe house in Nazi-occupied Paris, all while constantly under the threat of being discovered and arrested, or straight up having a random bomb crumble the building on top of him. Small side note that I just think is so James Bond. This is true during and before World War II. The MI6 branch in Paris stashed all their extra cash in the safe at the Rolls-Royce office in town.
Oh, cool.
How cool is that? Which Ian then used as his source of cash while in Paris. So he was literally going over to the Rolls-Royce office in Paris to get money to fund his evacuation process.
Huh.
Super neat.
That's really cool. This is making me think. I read probably in the last year, I read The Nightingale, which is a historical fiction novel based on women helping people escape from Nazi-occupied France.
Oh, cool.
And it's a really good book. So actually, it's funny because it popped into my head when you were talking about the guy that was using the books to help people get out, like
Percy Muir.
Yeah, it's not the same, but like they were like trading messages and
That's cool.
things like that.
So they were part of like the Underground Railroad that kind of formed?
Yes, that's
Very
what The
cool.
Nightingale is about.
Cool.
And anyway, I would, if anybody likes fiction, but historical fiction, like I would definitely recommend that book. It's by Kristen Hanna, and she's written a lot of also other great books. And
Cool.
It's one called The Great Alone that is like one of my favorite books ever. It's about people in Alaska. But keep going.
So once the office, you're fine. Once the office was successfully evacuated, Ian, along with a large group of French resistance fighters, met in Bordeaux. By this time, however, the Nazis had had enough time to push south and were quickly approaching Bordeaux. As a result, Ian was charged to oversee the entire British consulate. And with the Nazis rapidly approaching, his final act before heading home was to burn every document in the building lest they fall into Nazi hands.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine him in this old crumbling building in Bordeaux, just burning document after document, trying to save the British's intelligence reports.
That's really,
It's crazy.
also, it's just crazy to think about all of it.
Oh, I know.
And like now it's all, there's not anything written hardly.
Yeah, it's all digital and
It's
stuff.
all digital.
When the job in Bordeaux was done, Ian and Smithers headed just north to the port town of La Verdun, where dignitaries from Britain and the newly formed Vichy government were to negotiate the transfer of refugees out of Europe. Agreements were made, but just like we have seen before, logistics always play a factor, and they needed transport ships. Looking around at the vast harbors of La Verdun, Ian saw loads of merchant ships anchored in the harbor, just chilling. So he quote-unquote borrowed a motorboat.
Commandeered,
Sure, a motorboat. And all night, he personally went from ship to ship, asking if the merchants would lend their skills as sailors, their fuel, and their ships to help get the refugees out of France. Most of the captains said yes, but if they said no, Ian would reply by saying, quote, "If you don't take these people on board and transport them to England, I can promise you that if the Germans don't sink you, the Royal Air Force will." Which really seemed to help change their minds. Obstacle number 1 complete. Next was the issue of getting all of the refugees into one place, as many of them were still back in Bordeaux. There was only one bus in the area which seated 100 people, and the owner of it was being a real butthead and refused to let them use it, until Ian greased him up with a bribe, a little bit of cash.
Yeah, well.
Obstacle number 2 complete. Lastly was the issue of getting everyone onto boats, which required the unhappy task of telling every single refugee that they were only allowed to bring 2 suitcases and the clothes on their backs. Everything else they had to leave.
They didn't... It's funny because I'm kind of drawing on like some of the things that I read in that book just because she interviewed like a bunch of people and stuff. But like when you don't really understand like what is really happening, you might be very hesitant. Like, I can't do this. I can't leave this, whatever.
Intense situation though. And by the way, a lot of these refugees, a lot of them were Jewish.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of these people that saw the writing on the wall and were like, we have to go or we will be killed.
Yeah.
And so literally this was another one of those examples of Ian just going, all right, let's do this. So again, this is one of those where I feel like every time that I've mentioned Ian Fleming to anybody either online or personally that knows anything about him, it's like there's this first thing that pops up. Well, he was a misogynist. He was a blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I'm not saying he was a perfect human being and he had his issues and his problems, but like when I read these types of stories, I go, you cannot tell me that the heart of this human being was not in it to help people to some degree, was not in it to like be at least somewhat of a good person. Yeah. So anyways,
he was risking a lot being there. Because if you were found to be helping, especially if you're technically a British spy, like, can you imagine what would have happened to him?
Oh, I know. Totally. And that
we
was
wouldn't have James Bond, that's for sure.
And we'll later see this, but like this was the last time that they let him. Like, there's one other instance where he like we'll kind of see he's sort of part of a mission, but this is really the only other time that he gets to go because every other time the Admiralty says you are literally too valuable.
Yeah, you're too valuable to be out there in the field.
So much information that if they got you, it'd be we're screwed. Yeah. Like you know so much.
Cyanide capsule.
Kinda, yeah. Like he would have had to probably find a way to kill himself because he probably would have known I can't give this information away.
Yeah.
So. But at last, after all this work, the refugees were loaded up and on their way to England. That night, Ian, Smithers, and a few other British officers were invited to eat at the finest restaurant in the area. And knowing that the Nazis were only about 24 to 48 hours away from overtaking the town, the restaurant owner treated Ian and his company to the finest wine in the cellar. What would normally have been a great moment was completely lost on Ian as after the overwhelming and exhausting past few days, even weeks, that he had, he later said that he couldn't even remember what the wine tasted like. I mean, it's that level of exhaustion. Again, there is no rest in times of war, and before long, Ian was off to Madrid to assist with some negotiations. We're not going to get super into this, but on June 13th, the day that Ian had flown into Paris, Spain had changed its official stance in the war from neutral to quote-unquote non-belligerent. So Ian had to go help deal with that.
Non-belligerent?
Non-belligerent. When Ian got back to England, it was early July, and the Battle of Britain had just started. For anyone not familiar, the Battle of Britain was the very first large-scale military battle that was fought completely in the skies.
Oh.
The German Luftwaffe officially made their first attack on July 10th, 1940, and the battle officially lasted until October 31st of 1940.
Ooh, yikes.
This battle overlapped with and was then followed up by what is now known simply as the Blitz. Again, for anyone not familiar, the Blitz was a series of bombing attacks carried out by the Nazi Luftwaffe over Britain, with the primary focus being on London. The bombing campaign stretched from early September of 1940 all the way to May 11th of 1941. By the end of the Blitz, more than 2 million British homes would be damaged or in rubble, more than 2,200 aircraft would be destroyed, and conservative estimates put the civilian casualty count at 40,000 people. London would also experience a firestorm as a result of the Nazi incendiary bombs that ultimately burned down 436 acres of the city. And while this might not seem like a ton, I was actually shocked to learn that the city of London is only 716 acres.
Oh, wow.
So if my math checks out, and if it doesn't, please tell me because I'm not good at math.
No, it's definitely more than half. More like
60% of London was burned to the ground during the Blitz. And by the way, during the Blitz, Ian himself would survive 3 separate instances where the building he was in crumbled around him.
Oh my gosh.
Literally narrowly escaping death.
Oh my gosh.
Now that the war had truly escalated, all of the spy-related stuff got transferred to the newly formed division of the military called the Special Operations Executive, and of course, Admiral Godfrey made Ian the liaison between the department and the DNI. This was a really smart move on Godfrey's part, as he knew of Ian's proven track record in the field, in addition to his socializing and recruiting abilities through his various golf clubs, which gave him a unique edge in the world of spies. Because he got to know so many spies, he soon started to learn and even help pioneer all sorts of spy techniques and gadgets.
Ooh, gadgets. We love gadgets.
When Ian got back from his French assignment, though he didn't particularly care for shooting himself, he developed an intense fascination with guns, and soon he befriended the famed gun maker and shooting expert Robert Churchill. No relation to Winston.
Okay.
The two soon began tinkering with all kinds of firearms and even began developing different forms of gas-powered pistols, among all sorts of other crazy gun inventions. By the way, for any clay pigeon shooters or duck hunters out there, if you've ever heard someone talk about the Churchill method of wing shooting, yeah, that was invented by this guy, Robert Churchill. So, and from what I understand, it's a pretty foundational shooting technique.
Okay.
Like you learn from kind of day one. Peter Smithers, Ian's accomplice on his French mission, later recalled that among these inventions, a prize piece had been gifted to him by Ian in the form of a gas-powered gun hidden in a fountain pen.
Oh my gosh. Wait, how? What caliber bullet did it shoot?
I don't know, a little gas-powered something or other. I don't know. Smithers said, quote, "He gave me a pistol disguised as a fountain pen. It had 2 kinds of cartridges, lethal and non-lethal." So cool. Through another spy acquaintance named Lord Suffolk, Ian learned a technique where he could bite a person in just the right spot on the back of the neck to kill them instantly.
What?
But my personal favorite amongst this group of brilliant psychopaths was the extra brilliant Charles Fraser Smith. Charles Fraser Smith was the quartermaster for MI6. If you were James Bond, you would probably just call Charles Q. Among a massive list of awesome spy gadgets that Charles invented, some favorites include a miniature camera hidden inside of a lighter, a fountain pen that worked as a compass, steel shoelaces that worked as a saw, a hair comb that contained a map and also worked as a saw, a miniature telescope built into a cigarette case, tiny radio transmitters hidden inside of candy tins, secret messages printed on rice paper for quick consumption, and hollowed out golf balls that contained secret messages inside. That last one, by the way, Ian used in Diamonds Are Forever. In the book, James Bond uses hollowed out golf balls to smuggle diamonds inside of them.
Okay.
And also, for any die-hard Bond fans out there, yes, I know the character Q never officially appeared in the novels. He was originally named Boothroyd, okay? That was what he was in the novels, but the character was the basis for the development of the character Q in the movies. So, same if you ask me.
Okay.
Q and Boothroyd, same thing, and they were both from Charles Fraser Smith.
Okay.
Pretty radical, though. I love
Very
this guy.
Cool.
Okay. We are now in the fall of 1941, which, for reference, marks Ian as 33 years old and also marks the time of one very sad event in his life. During the evacuation of Dunkirk earlier that year, word came back that Ian's younger brother Michael had gone missing in action. A few months later, news caught up that Michael had been taken as a prisoner of war by the Nazis and that he had sustained a leg injury. In late November, they finally received the devastating news that Michael had died, presumably due to an infection related to his leg injury at the beginning of October. Ian did take the news hard, but had little time to process. As the nation was at war, everyone was grieving for a lost loved one, and duty called above all. So again, there is no rest in times of war, and Ian was soon dispatched to Europe for work related to his next mission. This time, Ian was headed to Madrid with the aims of winning over the American colonel, William Donovan, and convincing him that the Americans would be behooved to immediately start investing serious resources into their intelligence department. Up until now, they really didn't have one. Underneath the surface of all of this, Ian was on a time crunch, as for the past few months, he had been working on a massive scale, top secret operation. See, at this point, the British still weren't sure if the Nazis would invade Spain, or alternatively, if Spain would ally with the Nazis. If either of those scenarios played out, a massive waterfall of problems would arise for the British. Spoiler alert, the Nazis never invaded Spain, nor did Spain officially ally with the Nazis. But if they did, and it was very, very, very possible, Ian had been working on a plot to carry out a series of sabotage missions from inside of Nazi-occupied Spain, while still enabling his agents to transmit messages back to London. But crucially, he needed the support of the Americans for all of it to work, and Colonel Donovan was the key.
Okay.
This top-secret plot to maintain intelligence in a Nazi-occupied Spain that Ian had been working to develop for the past 6 months was working under the codename of Operation Goldeneye. And that's where we'll pick it up for part 4 of Ian Fleming.
Wow.
Pretty cool, right?
Very cool.
You can see all the little James Bondy seeds just click, 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 falling all into place.
Yep, I like it.
I'm thirsty.
It's a dry time of year.
There's a lot of talking, too.
Lots of talking, and there's not much humidity in the air.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay, this is really cool.
Pretty neat, right? Like I said, this is like my favorite stuff. And like the first half of the next episode, we're going to be like finishing up the war. And that's also some really, really cool stuff. But like this, I think this was kind of like why I wanted to get into Ian Fleming to begin with, is because I wanted to know how all this happened. How did it, what was the foundation of all of this stuff that led you to create something so specific, you know? And this was like going through all this stuff. I was like, I see it now. I see all of these people that you met. I see all of this system that was in place, all these governmental agencies you had to go through, all these weird little characters and personality traits, and it all sort of amalgamated into this James Bond character. I think it's like 15 years later after this point, something like that, 15, 20 years.
Super cool. I don't know. This is, it just makes you want to become more creative too. Like it makes you think like, I don't know. It just makes me want to go like write something that's fiction, like just make something up based on experience. Everything I come to is like a more modern Office or something like. My experience is all work.
I feel you.
I don't know.
Well, we should probably wrap it up, mostly because we've talked a lot, but two, because my wife is currently waiting in the garage for us to finish up our recording process here.
This is the creative process,
this
people.
This is what we live in. So a couple quick things here. We'll give a couple of shout outs. First and foremost, I suppose we'll say everybody go check out McQueen Pipes. I've been trying to drop the little ad that we have at the beginning of this episode, so it's probably already there for you. But again, go check out McQueen Pipes, MACQUEEN pipes.com. Use the code biographers at checkout. You're going to get 15% off your order. We're also going to give a shout out, like always, to my buddy Akiva. Go check out Metalwork by Miola. And he very accurately pointed out to me, he said, if it was Metalworks, that's a double plural. And I was like, you're completely right. Metalwork is plural, so that makes sense. Metalwork by Miola. If you use biographers at checkout, you're going to get 10% off there as well. Again, that is going to be for all of your really metalworking needs, but very specifically chef's knives. Go check them out. It's amazing, amazing stuff. Anything else, Aubrey?
No, I don't think so. I'm excited. Very interesting stuff. I'm just thinking about consuming a secret message made on rice paper.
Sounds kind of tasty. Season it up with some cinnamon.
Maybe I'll have some rice for dinner.
Ooh, that'd be nice. And then I guess I'll also say for everybody that's listening to this, it's definitely going to be a Happy New Year because this is going to be dropping in 2024. So Happy New Year to everybody. And then also I hope everybody had a great little holiday season and, had good times with their family and good food and all that kind of stuff.
And thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
We keep getting more feedback and like just, I listened to this or, it's just, thanks for listening. We're going to keep doing it.
We are. And we're we're in talks. There's no definites right now, but we're having talks about maybe doing a more weekly format and in hour-long episodes rather than these kind of 2-hour-long episodes we've been doing. But no promises there for a while because we have other things that we have to do in our lives, and I'll be honest with everybody, it's a lot of work to do all of this. So that is to say, though, for anybody that is curious, we might get there eventually. So stick with us. If not, just hit pause halfway through and then pick it up.
Yeah, your phone will remember where you were.
All right, well, I guess that's going to do it for us. But again, thanks everybody for joining. Happy New Year, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.